Hello, everybody. We are live. Welcome to the show where me and Brandon from the Hawks Nest get together to talk about all things Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, where the highlight of our week last week was that our quarterback was able to hand the ball off without breaking his finger, where our best player is apparently Brian Monet, and where the best thing that happened for this organization is that the fans spent so long booing Pete Carroll during that game that he had a mental breakdown in the post-game press conference. So we know it's a big holiday today, and a lot of you guys who would normally be in here might not be in here because you've got other things to do that are just a little bit more important, especially in a season like this. But to those of you who are here, welcome. To those of you who are watching later, welcome as well. Hope you have and or had a good Thanksgiving day. And whenever you end up watching this video, we hope we provide good insight. So, Brandon, I'm going to welcome you to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great, my sir. Happy Thanksgiving to you and everyone out there.
Yeah, it's we're going to have to find some things to be thankful for today. I don't know how much we're going to be able to find. You're probably going to have to find it outside of the world of football, you
I was
know?
going to say that.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm grateful that my water bottle here is full right now instead of empty, you know?
I got
I'm
I got hot coffee. I'm with you on that. Let's stay on that
yeah,
line. Let's keep it
yeah.
simple and low.
But so we got some stuff to talk about because this season has now officially bottomed out to where I don't think anybody's thinking playoffs anymore. Nobody's thinking about how can we save this season. Nobody's thinking about how can we somehow get in as that 7 seed. Maybe one or two people are, but I just think that most people have come to terms with the fact that there's nothing that's going to be able to bail us out this season, not just because we're 3-7, but because of what happened on the field on Sunday against the Cardinals. So, first, I'm going to ask you, what are you taking away from that Cardinals game on Sunday that we just played? What do you got?
Well, I think it says there's not been maybe one game that personifies best where things have gone wrong, organizational, coaching level, quarterback level. There's not been that one game that you can say this just shows everything that's wrong right now. This one comes pretty close to that. This one comes pretty close to giving you of here is an exact reason why right now folks like myself and Brendan and many others in the Seahawks fan base have been really pushing more and more for this change to come along, for major change to come along, because this is just unacceptable as the results. We're seeing it for too long. It continues to repeat. And then the issues that come up are not issues of, oh, well, this happened this week where we gave up the run. The next week we couldn't get up the pass. And the week after that, yeah, the offense couldn't get right. And then every week it's sort of similar reasons for why things go bad. And we'll touch, I got a part I'm going to unveil later on this show with you about basically unlearned lessons Coach Carroll and company have over the last 5-6 years have not refused to learn, not mistakes that they've gone bad with. It's where you've gone bad and then continued to do the same methodology, the same approach to end up where you end up. So schematically wise in this game, obviously we see still Russell Wilson unwilling, unable, not being coached to whatever the reason is, still not acclimating in any way, shape, or form to this new offense at all. Really, we don't see much of the embracing the short passing concepts at all. He still couldn't do the under center stuff in this game, which we talked about last week over on my channel, which is if you have a quarterback, you're removing all the playbook for this Waldron, for this McVay offense, and you're taking away all the under center stuff where he doesn't take any snaps under center. You're removing almost 40 to 50% of the playbook. That's going to hurt your offense. That's going to set you back behind. That's the opposite of giving yourself an advantage coming into the game. It's giving yourself a deficiency coming into the game. Defensive line wise, it was, I guess it was marginally better, but still horrific at the end of the day, where you've allowed Colt McCoy to dominate you in 2 straight seasons with
Mm-hmm.
different teams, with different personnel. And if that doesn't say something to you as a Seahawks fan of, wait, is there something to this thing? Is it Colt McCoy just has Carroll's number? No, it's what you and I've talked about many times prior. There's a reason why the backup quarterbacks come in and they're very functional. I call him squishy face Brendan. You always remember his name. What was it? Mullins?
Yeah,
Squishy
yeah,
face
Nick
Mullins
Mullins.
coming out to face the Seahawks, and here he comes to dominate. And all of us going, why is this guy doing it? But then the other guys don't, because those guys that stay in that pocket of how to attack this defense and don't go outside themselves, don't try to make those money shot throws down the field, right? Throws that they're not capable, frankly, of making, are not going to test your defense in the way you want them to test your defense. Instead, they're going to continue to attack your vulnerabilities and where you are weakest. And that is what Colt McCoy did this last week. That's what the game planning was set around for the Cardinals to do. And they executed it Precisely. You continue to see a lack of pass rush, Brendan. Nobody on the front four. You mentioned Brian Monet, which is fine, but you have nothing else being provided by anybody. Has Carlos Dunlap gotten a sack this year? And again, offensive line wise, just to flip one more time the offensive line, a quick note on this: you continue to run the ball, continue to be committed to it. It gets you some yards. I don't see really the impact in what it's providing for you at the end of the day and churning out first downs, generating points, keeping your defense off the football field. As again, we saw the time of possession in this game just slide way out of hand to the point you knew the defense was going to wear down. So not a lot of good I can take away from it. I'm definitely thankful for a lot of things right now, but the product on the football field is what it is. And Brendan, I think I'd be interested to hear if you can remember any other time. I do not remember any time in that stadium the fans booing from the start of the game in the first quarter all the way to the fourth quarter. That you had boos in that first quarter with that ridiculous third down and draw call. That ridiculous call, which that should hail down the boos. That was the dumbest call in that game by far. By far. That's saying something, Brendan. Saying something. So that's about what I got for it. I wish I could be more positive with it. I don't mean to hammer the negative. I think that's where we're going to kind of be because that's where we are. You're one of the worst teams in the NFL, but you shouldn't be. That's why we're angry about it. You shouldn't be.
Right. To any of the continued Pete Carroll or John Schneider apologists, and I know there are a few out there, I would hope that game was a wake-up call for you because it wasn't just a game. It was a game with your season on the line. You win that game, you've got some life. You lose that game, you're the second worst team in the NFL for all intents and purposes behind the Lions. No team will have a worse record than you other than the Lions. That game is for everything. And you're getting a Cardinals team with no Murray, no DeAndre Hopkins, no Justin Pugh, no Chase Edmonds, no J.J. Watt while we're at it. And I'm sorry. I know we lost the game by 10 points. I know that we were in the game until there were about 3 minutes left, but we got dominated and we got lucky that Arizona's drives took so long that there just weren't that many possessions. And also that Matt Prater felt bad for us, I guess, and missed a bunch of kicks. So to me, we should have lost that game like 42-17 or something. Mm-hmm. The game flow dictated that didn't happen. That's all that was to me. And pretty much every failure that this team has had lately really came to bear in that game. You cannot point to the offense, the defense. I don't even think you can really point to the special teams. Not that they did anything overwhelmingly terrible, but overall, I think ESPN Stats and Info did a study on this. We have one of the worst special teams in the league by EPA. So even that, which was sterling last year, has completely deteriorated. So there's really nothing left. And if you were still a pro Carroll person, if you still thought that he was the guy, I would hope that game alerted you to the fact that there really is something wrong here. This was not a close game where you lost by 1 or 2 plays. This is not a game where you showed some positive traits. This was a game where really, again, the best thing we had was Brian Monet. He had a sack and a half. Good for him. I have a hard time finding another player on this team who played well out of 53 guys or 45 who were active. So it's a wake-up call.
It's the question that, again, on a guy that's very controversial in Seahawks fandom and who even myself can kind of sometimes get on my nerves, but that doesn't mean that he didn't ask a valid question a couple of, about a month ago, which was he was presenting Coach Carroll's defenses and the decline of the defensive performance of the last 5 years. This is Colin Cowherd. And he said, specifically pointed to it, he says, what is it that Coach Carroll does well anymore? And for those people that want to have Carroll's back, and I have Carroll's back as far as being one of the best all-time coaches here. He's got a special place, all that stuff. But for a moment, we're talking about the here and now, not about legacy. And in the here and now, you got to be honest with it and saying, what is it that he does well? Player development, drafting, schematic coaching. You can go with the motivator based on what? This team doesn't look tremendously motivated. It doesn't look playing like the same fire it played with. I'm not talking about talent of the Legion of Boom era. I'm talking about fire. Where is the fire of those players we saw out there? I don't need talking and chipping. I mean, just you could see it in the way they moved out there back in the day, that those guys were all in, that thing that they're supposed to slap every day before they go into practice. And it's not a matter of, I think that there's not the talent there. I think the coaching staff's not getting it out of it. And the mistakes being made are so so many and so across the board. And that's where it comes down to, okay, this is where it's time for change because of these reasons. It's not because if we're looking at one simple thing going, I don't like way Coach Carroll coach, he go. It's no, it's this, that, this. And they're very specific things we're pointing to that not just us, but people nationally would point to, former players would point to. A variety of other folks beyond us would look at this and say, yes, this is the way it's playing out right now. And eventually you got to come around and go, maybe there's a point here. As much as you're trying to hold on to that, no, and Pete and John, I trust, maybe there is just to consider for a moment here that there's a point in all this.
Right. I don't understand how any team, much less a team that is supposed to have a great coach, goes out there in a game like that at home, division rival, season on the line, and then you put up that performance. And it not just the loss, but the pathetic level of the performance. We looked like one of the worst teams in the league on Sunday. We got very lucky to still be in that game at the end. And I'll say it again. If it wasn't for game flow, I think that's like a 42-13 or 42-17 game.
Yeah.
So I'm not taking anything away from the fact that we might have been a Jamal Adams pass interference call away from winning that game. I remember watching that last Cardinals touchdown drive, thinking to myself, how am I going to get on YouTube if we end up winning this game and talk about this game as a win? Because we didn't do anything good. I was pissed we lost, but I was almost happy that we lost because in a way it made sense, right? Like as a person who has watched football for 25 years now, that when you play like that, you're supposed to lose. Part of me was like, okay, thank God, at least we had a result that made sense.
Yeah.
So
that's such a better way to look at it because, again, it goes away from that thing. The trapping is always there for a play or two to stick in your mind as a football fan. Say, boy, if that play had just gone like that, if the officials had just given us that call. But there's 60, 70, 80 other plays between that call around that occurred. And if those plays have more of a general theme at play as to what was going on in the football game, that's probably more of a reason why you won or lost, whatever may be the case. And I think that that's true in this game. You're absolutely right on in the respect of the reason that the game flow you're talking about is basically the dink and dunk of Colt McCoy. He's got a 15-yard arm. He's not a guy that's going to be able to throw a 30-yard post up the field and put it on a line right on the guy. It's going to take some time to get there when he does, like the throw to A.J. Green where he lollipops that thing in and Trey Brown's sitting there waiting for it to go down and literally tears his ligament because he's waiting so damn long for the thing to come down. But that's Colt McCoy's soft arm, but he's got an accurate short arm. He's got a quick release. And those things work well for a quarterback like that going against our defense, which will allow the dink and dunk. And that's where, again, what does dink and dunk mean? Well, it means 5 yards. Quick 5 yards doesn't mean 10, 15 yards. It means you're slowly getting up the field, longer game, longer drives, quicker clock goes down, less possessions. That's the way that will play out every single time with that. And that's, again, what repeating mistakes, repeating themes.
Right. So we're pretty much over this season in terms of what happens on the field. Like if they play well down the stretch, then so be it. But I am trying to put a lot of my focus right now on the future of this team because this is a pretty significant crossroads. And I pretty firmly believe that if we don't change something big, maybe multiple big things this offseason, then we're not going to go anywhere that I want to go. So I made the error of actually listening to some of these Pete Carroll press conferences since that game. So let's just talk about that a little bit, because when you really listen to this stuff, you kind of can't believe that you're hearing it. I'm sure you're aware of the fact that for the first time in his Seahawks career, he walked out of a press conference with the media before the questions were done. Yeah. And then he came back and apologized and said, I'm just not used to this. He said something like, I'm doing everything I can think of and nothing's working, and I don't know how to deal with losing like this. So it kind of makes you feel a little bad for him. It does remind you that he is a human, he is a man, and he does have some level of pride that is currently being damaged very much. But when once you get past that, doesn't it kind of become pathetic? Because the media was not grilling him. The media wasn't asking him brutal questions like, do you think you're going to get fired? Did you think about benching Wilson when he couldn't throw a pass because of his finger? Why haven't you fired Ken Norton yet? Are you going to fire anybody this week? No, they were asking him the normal questions that they typically ask a Pete Carroll. Yeah. So for him to get so rattled that he actually walks out, I actually think that a part of it was just the fact that he was so shocked that his own fan base would spend 3 hours booing him. I think that got to him. I will never know, obviously, but I can't help but feel like that really got to him because that had never happened before.
I think you're onto something. It's one thing to say, well, these guys that are on YouTube talking stuff, what do they know? Or people on Reddit, what do they know? Or somebody online says something, he can insulate himself behind their 65,000 people every day who's, no matter what they say online, I go in that stadium, I hear nothing but 65,000 cheers, and that this is a little bit of the double-edged sword I've said of Coach Carroll's personality, of the optimist, of the glass is always half full. Both sides of school of thought, be a pessimist or an optimist, have their sides of negatives to them when you operate that way, especially when you uber operate one way or another, right? When you're an uber pessimist or an uber optimist, then that opens up the door for that other side of that sword to cut that much deeper when it's slicing the wrong way. And when it slices the wrong way is you're covering up with your platitudes and we just made a play or two here or there. If a Russ just makes a throw or two, or get a couple more first downs, when you're doing that, you're again getting lost in the fixated on the little tiny thing here and not looking at really what the main cause is at the structure. You're looking at kind of little symptoms and not really back to the root cause, which is again why we can point to over and over again the mistakes being made, Brendan, are the ones that get made over and over again here. We see every mistake being made this season. Everyone you go down the line on, Brendan, and we'll go down in it later on the show a little bit down the line on these, but everyone you go down the line on has been made in recent prior seasons. And in some cases, almost every single one of them. At what point in time does that come back to the desperate need for change somehow? And for him to be shocked by this at this point, being that so many things, it's where a little bit of my sympathies go. I do have I have a little bit of your sympathy with it. I do. And I love Carroll. That's why I want to always try to preload this, Brendan, and saying, we love Coach Carroll. I value him. I don't want to take anything out he did. He is a Hall of Fame head coach, Hall of Fame coach in college, one of the best coaches of all time, almost because of that fact alone, because both of those require two different hard skill sets you have to bring to bear. But again, talking about the now, and looking at the recent history of what's led us here, you go, I don't know how he's so shocked of it. And the Seattle media, I God love them. I've kind of given up on them ever asking a tough question. And if they do, I feel like they're going to come running out the building flexing. If they ask like one question, come out, did you guys see that now? What do you think that now? Was that good? Were you finally happy I didn't just lollipop one in there? I gave that one some heat. You see that? I said that I asked that with some vigor.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. And then you hear him say something like, what did he say? The mistakes that we made in this game are the same mistakes that we've been making all season. They're the same errors that need to get corrected. And you know what I think when I hear that? I think that means the players aren't listening to you anymore. I know that that's his. I think it's his way of like subtly trying to passive aggressively throw the players under the bus and say it's not my fault. But like, you're calling yourself out and you don't even know it because you're that lost right now. You're that on autopilot. That's the term that I used with this team right now. They are on autopilot.
Yeah.
And then you hear him say yesterday that, oh, we're going to simplify the offense. We're going to take it back. We're going to simplify even more.
Right.
And simplifying the offense is why we're here right now.
Yeah.
We fired our offensive coordinator last year because it was too simple. He wasn't scheming receivers open. He wasn't tricking people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring in a new offensive coordinator so you can make things more complex. And you're thinking now in the midpoint of the season, no, we're going to scale it back more instead of, we should be incorporating more of the new stuff in. And it just, I can't believe we're having this season, not just the bad record, not just the bad result, but we're at the point now where we have a 10-year veteran at quarterback. He's been here 10 years. He's been in the league 10 years. And you think that the solution is to make things simpler for him like he's a rookie who just got into the NFL. And you think that that's going to help you when that's the reason why you fired Schottenheimer last year. I'm not saying that there is no reason why they did it. I understand why he might be thinking that's the solution because this team isn't doing a good job of incorporating the more complex stuff, but how are we getting less complex? We already use motion less than all but 4 teams in the NFL. I don't know if you saw that or not. ESPN Stats and Info did a study. Only 4 teams use less pre-snap motion than we do. So how can it get more simpler?
Which is also, again, part and parcel of Sean McVay's offense. So, Yeah, explain that one to me as well. You brought a new offensive coordinator not to implement his new offense, which we're seeing, frankly, across the board. Lack of use of outside zone runs. You mentioned lack of scheming guys up, lack of flood zone concepts, lack of really incorporating fly sweeps into the game. Again, we can go down the line. We've spoken about it ad nauseum, but there's a multitude of things they're not doing, which were supposed to be part of this offense, which have just been thrown out the door already before him having that sound bite. And I would tell you this as well. I think there's a couple other things he's saying on top of it. It's a passive aggressive the players to say they're making the same mistakes over and over again. But what it also is, and what I don't know if he's keenly aware of this, is it's an indictment on your coaching. You can't coach these players who you've scouted, who you've done investigatory work upon to see if they were guys that would be able to fit into your system and acclimate and understand what the things that you did. You had pre-camp visits with them prior to the draft into your building to see how they feel in your building. Now you're hitting across the line with all of them unable to understand your stuff conceptually. That despite you teaching it wonderfully is what you're intimating a little bit, what he's intimating. I don't buy it to a degree. And I think part of it is, to your point, a little bit of the players probably tuning out a little bit of this. The other part that I laugh at with this, Brendan, defense or offense. I guess the offense, it makes a little more sense because it's Waldron stuff and you're going, okay, we're going to dial that back. Let me double back that in a second though. On the defensive side of the ball though, we're going to simplify what we do on defense. You run one of the most simplified defenses in the entire NFL. You show the highest rate pre-snap and coverage of what you then perform in post coverage than nearly any team in the NFL. You don't run a lot of heavy blitz game. You don't run much stunt work on the front four. What is the complexity on this defense that needs to be dialed back? But that's maybe the part, and maybe there's some finite detail in it I'm not understanding that they're trying to do on the fly this season. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing some crazy new stuff they're doing secondary wise. The data doesn't back it up. The statistics don't back it up. So while I can maybe understand it on the offense a little bit, I don't get that at all with the defense. And my only other point on that with the offense is this. This also speaks to the direction of where this team's looking to go as far as the post Russell Wilson years go, Brendan, and speaks to a little bit more of the pill that frankly will end up being swallowed this offseason. Because if you were continuing on with Russell Wilson post this year, and ideally you're not going to probably fire Waldron 1 year after being an offensive coordinator here, if that's going to be the case, you would want him, even through this bumpy road, to be acclimating and learning this offense and continuing through the struggles for the long-term gains that will bring out. Those Shanahan, Matt Ryan gains that we talked about in the Matt Ryan MVP season after, which was his second year with Shanahan at the helm as an offensive coordinator there in Atlanta. But you're now throwing that all out the gate to potentially recapture this season's whatever it has left to give you to maybe slide yourself in the back end of the playoffs if you can go on some magical 7-0 run, which I don't even think simplifying is going to fix it that way personally, Brendan, unless they're just going all back to their old offense and trying to just run man-on-man stuff, no more reach blocking, no more, it's just all the old same stuff. And like, well, what the hell, it can't hurt, which maybe that's what they're talking about doing.
Yeah, real quick here, Go Hawks 2022. Thank you for the $9. Have a great Thanksgiving, guys. Draft only 5 months away. Press in Seattle must love soft questions. It feels like they do. Like, I'm sure you guys heard about the Matt Nagy thing a few days ago, where a reporter actually asked him, hey, did you hear the report that you're going to be fired after the Thanksgiving game? Like, that's a pretty brutal question to ask a coach in a press conference, and we don't do things like that here. You look at other media locations in places like New York or I don't know, other bigger media markets. Yeah, they're more brutal. We don't really do that. I think Joe Fan was one of the guys who would kind of do that, but he's not here anymore. So
is that you know, I know he got left because the Blazers thing with the whole selling off of the Root Sports, but yeah, I think I got that in my comment section this week. Somebody drilling me on, see how players must just hate the fans here, want to just leave them. Like, you have not looked at other markets, my friend, because other markets make us look like we're big softies here. Even me and Brendan, comparatively speaking, to how other players get the business and throughout the rest of the markets in the NFL.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, Pete Carroll got asked a question in one of his pressers if he liked Ruffles or Lay's more. I'm not kidding, by the way.
I know.
I'm not kidding. This happened, okay? And at first, I thought the person asking the question must have been like 11 years old and was doing their 5th grade homework assignment on pretending to be a media person for a day, or shadowing their dad doing media work for a day. But no. Right guy, Right Guy, thank you for the $1.99. The media here is soft.
Big
Yeah?
soft.
Yeah,
Sherman
big
soft.
soft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks to the donations, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but we were talking about you mentioned the Waldron thing, and you mentioned scaling the offense back. I almost feel like that Carroll's already going to try to use Waldron as the scapegoat because there's starting to be some energy being built around this idea of Waldron's going to be the guy to fall on the axe after this season. I'm seeing it from some of the articles on like 12th Man Rising. I'm seeing it on Facebook. I'm seeing that he's going to be the guy that Carroll says, no, it's all his fault. It's all his fault. We're going to get him out of here and we're going to be amazing again. And it just irritates me because he already has had multiple scapegoats since he got here. Tom Cable was a scapegoat. Brian Schottenheimer was a scapegoat.
Bevel.
Bevel was a scapegoat. And you know that old joke about the CEO taking over a struggling company and then he gets 3 envelopes from his predecessor? And the guy's like, open an envelope every time you face a crisis. First envelope says blame your predecessor. And he does. He buys himself more time. Second envelope says reorganize. He does. He buys himself more time. And then there's another crisis and he opens the third envelope. It says prepare 3 envelopes. It's basically saying you only get so many chances to mess up. But I feel like Carroll's had a lot of envelopes. And I don't want to give him another one.
Add Chris Richard to your list, your scapegoat list there. And that's where we land is that, again, I would be okay with moving forward with Carroll, your black pill scenario, if we had reason to believe something and don't just point to he's been a winner, consistent winner. Let's throw that out on what we're looking at on the field, on the product we're watching on the football field, all the problems that are coming up. If I knew that there were things I could feel like were getting fixed to go to that forward range of things, but there's nothing I'm getting to see on this field that really tells me this is being fixed and that fundamentally it's broken at a high leadership standpoint on this. It's not because you don't have your right couple of players in a couple of positions. It's because, quite frankly, your scheme's old, the methodology is old, there's a staleness to everything out there right now, and a lack of adaptation, lack of innovation, and too many desperate moves that have been made with too many disparate parts that don't make sense when you put them together. And that's what you get. And that's, I can't back that going forward kind of because of that.
Mm-hmm. DM, thank you for the $4.99. Happy Thanksgiving to the both of you. Thankful for the content you put out this offseason is going to be something, huh? I mean, I hope so. If some people get their way, we're not going to really do anything. We might fire the coordinators and that's it. And I'll say it again. We fired a coordinator last year and we're here right now. So doing that again is not good enough. You got to go up another level. Now you're like, okay, we got rid of a coordinator. Now you have to go, okay, maybe the coordinator wasn't the problem because now things are worse.
Yeah.
So you got to look at the head coach, the GM, the quarterback, which I'll get to in a second here. But to me, doing the same thing where you just say it's a coordinator's fault. No, you're missing it. You're missing it. And you're giving Carroll another scapegoat.
And remember too, to your point of what a couple of months ago you made this, you reset the clock on now your period of, if that means Russell's gone, I guess, because the clock now on that offense now getting morphed in again and learned through a year period starts back to 0. This year period we're in where the players are learning, okay, so where my hand placement's got to go from here to here on the reach block, and I need to take 2 steps to the false. Okay, then I come back there. If I make the adjustment to this, all that stuff gets set over the course of the year. And by year 2, you take off. Well, now that goes back to 0 if you've got to flip it all out again. Offensively, it really does work that way where it requires that year for the most part to get it done. And we've learned that lesson the hard way this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that was like a good 15 minutes on the Pete Carroll stuff. I guess that's pretty good. I've really had him in my sights this week because this week is the time to call him out and hold him accountable more than ever because you can't point to anything. You can't say, yeah, we did all these stupid things, but we still won. You can't say, well, we were 1 play away from winning or we took it to overtime or anything like that. You can't say anything. You can't say, well, we could win next week and then we could get on a roll and save the season. No, there's nothing left to say. Yeah. There is probably going to be some point later this season where for the first time in Russell Wilson's career, he takes the field for a team that is already mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. And that's never happened before. Every game he has played, he has gone in knowing the Seahawks are still alive in the postseason. Mm-hmm. That's about to be over. So all these things that you hold on to doesn't matter anymore. All that stuff's getting broken. Wilson has now lost 3 games in a row. Carroll has now coached several years in a row of a lackluster defense. So all these things that you hold on to, they're all gone. There's nothing left to hold on to now.
It's good. Good way of putting it. It's like you put your hands in the sand in a beach and you come up and you got it cupped. And then you let a couple of your fingers open up and some of that sand drain out. And that the sand when it's full up is what Carroll's brought to this team from day one in his methodology, his approach, his drafting, the signings they made, the approach they had. Now your fingers open up, more and more of that sand slips through at the end of the day. And you get to the point where you still got a little bit of sand that's sitting on the top of the fingers, right? A little bit up here, but the majority of the sand's been leaked out, and it's so minimal at this point. The returns just aren't there to what they once were, nor will ever come back. The sand's gone. It's slipped through. It ain't returning. To Carroll's own words, I've tried everything. You said a few minutes ago, I've tried everything. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I don't, honestly, it feels kind of weird to have Carroll still as our head coach after he says and does something like that. It's almost like, remember the Seinfeld episode where George quit his job at the office because the boss slighted him, and he went on this big rant and tirade like, I hate you, you are the worst, da da da, and then he leaves the building, and then he realizes later, oh, I overreacted, and then he just tries to show up for work the next day and hopes that nobody like notices. And it kind of feels like that with Carroll. How can you say I've tried everything I can think of and we still suck and still be the head coach? I don't. It feels weird to me.
You don't want your leader to ever go, I'm out of ideas. We're just about to take this berm, sir. You ready? Got everything? I don't know. We've tried everything. I'm not sure what to do. Huh? I just don't know. I've given all. I don't know. I'm out of ideas. Anybody else got anything? That's it. It's not a good place to land, my guy. It's not solid footing. And again, he's giving you more and more signs. And he said it was that comment a couple of weeks ago. I've been here a long time. I wouldn't have been here as long without Russell Wilson. That comment in itself was pointing to, maybe he's letting us know without wanting to let us know that we're kind of on the right path with this stuff.
Yeah. And then he had that comment yesterday where he said, like, my relationship is the best ever with Russell Wilson by far. It's like, nobody believes that.
No.
We're not stupid.
No.
You actually think we believe that? No, not even close. Especially because the previous day, this is up to interpretation, but I think Wilson spent a decent chunk of his press conference on that day blaming the problems on Russell Wilson. So no, nobody's going to buy that. Yeah. Like just at least scale it back on the hyperbole. You can say that your relationship with Wilson is still good. Maybe it is, but don't try to convince us it's the best it's ever been. It's better than it was when he was coming off a Super Bowl champion, when you had maybe the best defense in NFL history. Give me a break.
Yeah, I don't buy it, and that's part of that thing. The double speak, we're not going to be authentic, and then the of course media doesn't follow up with any questions to press his feet to the fire with. Wait, this decision making you made, like for instance, sitting on $13 million of cap space this year when you could have used that to put more. Why you don't have follow up questions that are pressed like that? So he doesn't get asked on it, and he tries to hide behind those stupid. But again, they're lies. His relationship is not as great as it's ever been with Russell Wilson. There's no person out there that can believe that. You cannot believe that. There is no way that is the case. I mean, there's so much data to back this up. It's ridiculous for him to say it, but he makes ridiculous comments like that all the time, which seem to be just sort of sunshine and roses that he's looking to blow up somebody's butt rather than actually giving us really the truth. And I know coaches can't just give you always the cold, hard truth of it, and that they've got to play a little bit of that game anyway, as a politician would. But it does get to a point where you're like, all right, are we getting any truth now when you speak on anything football matter? Why or is everything being kind of hid behind this filter of BS? I mean, you start to wonder a little bit with that,
Right, guy, thank you for the $1.99. Judy Allen is part of the problem. Possibly. We don't know. I mean, she did fire the Blazers head coach despite him making the playoffs every year he was there practically. And she did make a somewhat controversial head coach hire to replace him. So I don't know. We'll find out a lot about Judy Allen in the coming years, but to say that she's part of the problem yet, I'm not convinced. We'll see.
I'll say this about that Rye Guy's point on this, Brendan, and where I stand. I agree with you. I don't think we can say prior to this point she's been part of the problem. Team won a division title last year. I understand giving the coach an extension. If you go into this year and you do nothing this offseason, she will have earned being part of the problem. And the thing about the Blazers I read about this week that opened my eyes a little bit to this is that right now they're trying to basically with his general manager get him fired for cause or something like that. And then at the back of this is sort of the thought process, the thinking behind this, as far as what I'm reading online, is that Jody's is doing this to save the money on having to pay that general manager. So you can see where I'm going with this to a degree, which is if you got to fire Coach Carroll and we're talking about having to come out of pocket somewhere in the neighborhood of like $44 million is what I've heard reportedly you're going to have to pay to Carroll to move on from him. Where if she's already kind of flinching at that with the Blazers on much lesser cost for a general manager, she definitely wouldn't do it at that point with Carroll, at which point, Brendan, to Brian guy's question, she becomes part of the problem, in my opinion.
I think the answer to this solution is we need to take a good long look at Pete Carroll's email history. If you know what I mean.
I'm sure they're combing through the servers as we speak.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Russell Wilson here, because I spent a lot of this week talking about Carroll, but we got to talk about Wilson again too, because I did the video yesterday. His air yards went up again. His air yards are up at 9.9 per attempt. And the thing is, his air yards per pass completion is actually down compared to the average. Yeah. So the passes he's completing are the shorter passes, but he can't stay away from the deep stuff. So, I mean, we have to talk about it. It's not like Pete Carroll has his hand up Wilson's butt, using him like a hand puppet, telling him to throw it 50 yards down the field every time. No, Wilson is doing that of his own accord. Yeah. So we got to figure out if this is salvageable, because right now I'm kind of thinking that it isn't. He's had too much success. He is what he is at this point. He's a 10-year NFL veteran. He doesn't understand it. I'm really worried about that not being salvageable right now.
I'm growing more into that camp as well, of course, where it's doling out blame to the appropriate camps, and it's not just one camp or the other camp. There's different camps here of guys. Still think Carroll gets most of the blame, but by no means do I not think Russell Wilson has a big amount of this on his shoulders as well, because it all comes back to my mind, stemming to the bottom line here, which is that you have to embrace this new offense. And that means embracing the bumps and the ups and the downs and the ins and outs. And sometimes you're going to fire it 10 yards over Lockett's head like you did in the Packers, where a guy's wide open on a short route. But when you start to get in your rhythm and you start to get more comfortable with it, that is when you at that point are going to be able to really see the benefits of it. But the problem is when he continues to like a petulant child sitting in their chair and the mom's just giving him vegetables and they're going, no. It's like, look, they're going to be best for you. Can make you feel better when you eat these. I don't want to eat them, and just give me my mac and cheese. And like, well, I get it, Russ. You like mac and cheese, but you got to have some vegetables in here with this. And he's not. I'm watching very, very closely as you are, Brendan. We don't have to really even watch closely because of the stat you just provided. Essentially, him just trying to chuck everything down the field 15, 20, 30, 40 yards, and you're just going, man. Embrace the short passing game. That's what you're supposed to be doing here, Russ. Throw short, get in a rhythm. There were a couple drops in this game that didn't help him, but beyond that, he's not embracing it. That's really where it starts for me and ends. I could get beyond him having problems with the finger and not being able to take stuff under center. Okay, fine. You're throwing out all that stuff. I could get him being inaccurate on throws. But I'm not going to embrace the short stuff. That's not going to be what we do with me. I'm with you. I don't know if this is going to change. If he can't, we're over halfway into the year and he's even come off an injury, not willing to really embrace it. How can we say next year he's going to, into an off season he suddenly will? What proof do we have that light bulb turns on?
Right. It kind of makes me think of Tony Romo. Early in Tony Romo's career, he blew off turnovers. Like, the media would ask him, why do you have a turnover in every game? And he basically went, well, we won, didn't we? Like he thought turnovers didn't matter. Sometimes they would ask him about an interception he threw, and he was like, well, it's like a punt, so it doesn't really matter. And eventually, it took years and years and years, but eventually I think he kind of really got it and understood that I can't be turning the ball over like this. I have to protect the ball. I can't play like it's the backyard. I can't just be chucking it up and hoping for the best. Yeah. And I think part of the reason why that worked is because Romo had very little success early in his career team-wise. He had one playoff win in the first, 7 or 8 years of his starting career. But Wilson has won a Super Bowl. He's won, I think, we're on 9 playoff wins. He has 9 playoff wins. He's played in 2 Super Bowls. He's won several division titles. He's had a lot of success. Yeah. So he might just feel like, well, playing this way got me here, so playing this way is going to get me to where I want to go now. And that might make it a little harder for him to move off of it. And I mean, a lot of people are killing Waldron right now, But you can't tell me that Waldron is in the film room telling Russell, hey, keep throwing it to Lockett 50 yards down the field when he's in double coverage. Ignore Travis Homer wide open for a 6-yard gain. Like, that doesn't make any sense on any level.
I think people have got to fight against this urge right now to go after Waldron. I really do. I think that this is a silly place to be in, because the reasons we're just speaking about, the quarterback is obviously not taking the routes. There was the route last week against the Packers we talked about over my channel last week, where you've got Lockett going up and he's going basically into double coverage, as we saw Russell again throw into double coverage deep in this game to DK Metcalf. And instead he's got Gerald Everett right there on a flat route. And anytime we see the overhead shots in these games, when they do show us the all 22 shot or an overhead shot, there's always a player open in a flat or open short underneath and wide open at that. And I mean, there was a play in this game where they're down near the end zone, where he ended up throwing it away in the back of the end zone, where if he just stepped up into the pocket, which is something Russell hesitates to do, just step up, climb. They call it climbing the pocket. And he won't climb it. If he just climbed it, a half a second later, he climbs, the defender goes past, Everett is sitting wide in front of him, wide open right there in front of him in the front of the end zone. And I'm not seeing any of that willingness to embrace that. You've got the soundbite from the Jacksonville Jaguar game where we talked about Waldron going over, going, hey, Pete Carroll, do you want it to be run, pass, run, pass? Keith Carroll goes, I want touchdowns. Well, that obviously means him simply going over there and asking Carroll a 3-string play of runs of what he wants to have called shows you right there that Carroll is having a lot of say. And hey, well, let's do this, let's do that. That's proof of that. We don't have the behind the curtain stuff, but here's a little tiny glimpse you have of Waldron Carroll interaction. One little tiny glimpse of it, and it just so coincidentally shows us Carroll having a huge amount of say, playing and play out of what they get done and what they do. This stuff all leads away from it being Waldron's fault. This all leads it back over when you look, especially when Schottenheimer left yet last year. Was it firing? No, it was a mutual parting of ways, i.e. Schotty was kind of getting fed up with certain stuffs too. So how you point this back to Waldron, with having a star quarterback miss 4 games, having a coach in on him all the time, having the star quarterback at no point really embrace his new concepts, having a coach who he doesn't have the talent to have anybody run the outside zone run now without Rashad Penny in the game. So it's right back to now hammering the ball inside. Coach Carroll's comment, sorry, I'm going long on this, Brendan, but Coach Carroll's comment on a couple weeks ago, where Coach Carroll said, yeah, we're really encouraged by him embracing some of the things we used to do here. What? What do you brought him here not to do the same? You said this earlier in the show, that you didn't bring him here to do the same old stuff. So again, how do you hold him responsible? How is it his fault? All of that in tow. Last point on this, you didn't bring the offensive lineman to fit his scheme. Your offensive linemen need to do reach blocks in this system. They need to get their fat behinds up out of their stance and get over to the player who's downwind of them, not the player who's across from him, as you would normally have in a mano-a-mano type scheme, a man-on-man type scheme. You went out and got none of those mobile offensive linemen. Zero, zip, nada, zitch, nothing. You got none of those these offseason to acclimate to the type of offensive scheme you were implementing. And then you wonder why your 350-pound man of goo can't move from step 1 to step 4 and get his block on. Sorry,
absolutely.
I'm off my soapbox, man.
I said this last week in the show, and I'll say it again. The only players on this offense that are Waldron's players are Gerald Everett and I would say Dwayne Eskridge, who has played like 20 snaps, and you could say Gabe Jackson, but I don't know about that. I mean, we needed somebody there. We traded for somebody who was available. I don't know if Waldron really picked Gabe Jackson, but that's kind of one of his players too. But yeah, there's so much here that he inherited. There's a lot of stuff here that he doesn't want. You think he wants his left tackle to be a 36-year-old guy who moves like he's got concrete boots on, or just it's. I mean, Waldron hasn't done anything to ingratiate himself to me yet, but I fully acknowledge that if we do fire him this offseason, it will be another Carroll scapegoat. And I'm not going to indulge him in having another scapegoat. But yeah, those are the two big things for me. And I said yesterday in, I think it was a video or a stream, that at this point, one of those 3 guys has to go this offseason for me to be okay with it. Either Wilson, Carroll, or Schneider, because you got to go up. You got to move up a little bit. You can't just let it be coordinators. That was last year, and now things are worse. Yeah. It's like, I'm a software developer. I know this kind of stuff. When you have a program that isn't working, you start removing stuff. Mm-hmm. And then you test it again. If it still doesn't work, you realize, oh, okay, the thing that I removed wasn't the problem. it's something else. And then you start removing other things until you eventually find where the problem actually is. You don't just keep replacing the same part over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's again, you make a mistake and you go, okay, I make a mistake. How do I not make the same mistake I get? How do I not take the same approach and methodology I took before? That's basically what you're saying. Change the track every time to then find the solution. Otherwise, it will continue to just break because it's shown you that's what it's done prior. You can continue to run the program again. Oh, it keeps breaking it. You got to do something new within it to make it to go to a different degree of things. And if you do the general manager, I'll say this: if you go that track with the Brendan, you better give him the power. Carroll now has all of that presidency stuff removed. You're a head coach. This general manager now runs everything full gamut. He has say over the personnel, and you're just going to have to deal with that. That would have to be at least, because just generally changing out the general manager with Carroll still having oversight on the stuff. Again, this is the problem we run into. Again, is too much control on his part. Where got to remove that to understand who's doing what wrong and poor.
Yeah, I think it would be weird to get rid of John and not get rid of Pete at the same time. Don't get me wrong. If that's the thing that happens this offseason, I do think that would be kind of like, really? That's the best you can do? But at least it's a level up from just the offensive coordinator, because, I mean, our player acquisition over the last several years has been pretty abysmal too. So it's not like the GM is blameless here.
No.
Like, we can criticize game plans, we can criticize play calling, we can criticize schemes, but we needed 2 impact rookies from this class. I know we only had 3 picks, and we kept saying, like, we have holes. We need 2 impact rookies here, and well, it's not totally their fault, but right now we have 0, basically. We had 1 good month from Trey Brown. That's it.
Yeah,
So,
well, what can we put? But then with Eskridge, this is the one that becomes more and more clear, where he's healthy the last couple of weeks. He's not getting on the field. They've run 1 fly sweep with him back with the Packers last week, and then they didn't want to run. I mean, even if you just want to give him one little roll, right? Just trot out 3 fly sweep plays on a game like this last week where you're not able to generate any yards. What's that hurt to do something like that? I don't know what the plan is for a guy in Eskridge you put a 2nd-round pick on, who is now healthy. I'm to understand is healthy. He's been healthy. Where is he? Where's the utilization of him? Just nothing. You can't get to you've got guys like, literally, it drives you crazy. He can't beat out Penny Hart in the depth chart right now, Brendan. You're throwing balls to Penny Hart in these football games. You're throwing balls to Freddie Swain, who he can't beat out. Freddie Swain was a 7th-round pick. I know fans love him here, and then, Freddie Swain, he's a 7th-round pick. This is a 2nd-round pick. This kid who's a 24-year-old 2nd-round pick, he can't beat out Freddie Swain.
Yeah, he's probably the fastest guy on this team, by the way. Don't tell me he couldn't potentially add another dimension to this offense, but yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that's just messed up here. It feels like the plan to build the team and how the team is actually run are 2 completely different people. It's unbelievable. Okay, so I think we talked a lot about Pete. We talked a lot about Wilson. We talked a lot about the general dysfunction with this team. I'm going to go ahead and kind of slow it down a little bit. There's other stuff we could get into, like Pete was asked about Alton Robinson, and he said, yeah, we want to get him out there more, as if he's not in control of that, which that's not the first time that's happened this year, by the way. I mean, we could talk about that, but we know. I mean, to me, it kind of feels like you're in that marriage now, and you've already decided that this is going to end in divorce. There's nothing to scream at him. You don't have to go, oh, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. No, you just acknowledge that it's done, and you got to move on. So we got a game coming up on Monday night. Unfortunately, the whole nation is going to get to watch us. Mm-hmm. And they're going to get to watch us play against a team that has shown improvement over the past couple of games they played. So the Washington football team, what are you looking for from this game?
Well, obviously I think, is Sweat out in this game?
Yes, I think he broke his jaw. He's not back yet.
So he's not back yet. The key on this game for me does, as we're approaching what's still a week ago, still remains the key. Even with them playing a little bit better, it does become a little bit about the fact you're able to maybe attack their edges a little bit. They're not going to be able to generate a little bit of the pass rush that they would be able to normally generate with those 2 guys. Now, Jonathan Allen's still really good from the inside, and they've got some good depth. But you're missing your big 2 guys. Those are 2 of your most important, probably defensive players across the board. And so that's got to impact them defensively and going up against us on an offense that needs some breaks going in their direction. Let's face it, they do. I think the offense is going to be able to get some stuff done against this defense. I don't know if it comes down to really running the ball as much as it comes down again to throwing the ball. Can you throw the ball and do it efficiently and look reasonable with it? I'm not expecting a 300-yard day from Russell Wilson, but can you give me 250? Can you do a little bit more of playing within yourself a little bit and less of the hero ball? It's frankly, Brendan, we never thought about this with Russell, but he has become and is a gunslinger. I mean, he is more now. He's Brett Favre without the interceptions a little bit in his methodology and approach from the pocket. So, Russell being probably patience a bit of this. Defensively speaking, they can attack you a couple different ways, right? Good tight end, good receiver, a couple of other receivers around that are all right. That are functional and reasonable. They can run some stuff with their slot guy there. They got a ways to attack you. Antonio Gibson's talented. So they've got enough there to get you. Heineke's not going to really do that much against you as far as the passer goes, but he's got a lot of similar elements to McCoy. Not as accurate, maybe not quite as quick a release, more mobile. But a guy that's also probably not going to go outside of himself in the passing game and do that thing that Carroll's defenses are hoping for, which is to take that risk and chance, and then you get your big interception down the field. You get your game-changing play. They've got to get some pass rush though, Brendan. They've got to turn the team one-dimensional and find some pass rush on this defensive side of the ball, because it is absolutely Darrell Taylor has lost whatever he had through the first 5 games. I don't know if it's the neck or not, but nobody is giving them any juice right now outside of occasionally a Brian Monet or an Al Woods or a Puna gets in there on a play here or there. But it's like once every 20 pass plays at that point, 25 pass plays.
Right. And it kind of feels like everybody who plays on this defensive line just gets infected eventually and becomes ineffective as a rusher. It kind of reminds me of when Tom Cable was here on the offensive line. And players would get worse and worse. And then we traded for Dwayne Brown, who we knew was good. And when we first got him, he was really good. As that year went on, by the end of the season, Dwayne Brown actually looked pretty awful. And I was like, well, okay, I know Dwayne Brown's good because he was good for years and years and years in Houston. He didn't suddenly forget bad. No, Tom Cable is infecting these guys. And then you got him out, and things did actually get better. It's not where we wanted to be, but Solari did actually turn a lot of those guys around. Even if Fetty looked okay under him. So I think we're seeing some similar stuff on this defensive line.
Well, and it's the place I go back to when I look at the defensive line and their struggles to rush the passer in the last few years, especially being in the one time I haven't talked to a lot of former players. The one former player of the Seahawks that I talked to talking about it was the pass rusher, talked about the struggle of rushing the passer because first and foremost, play in and play out, they are told to concentrate on the run game. Stop the run and then get into your pass rush. Stop the run, then get into your pass rush. It's kind of hard to do. I'm going to get off my blocks. First, make sure I got to maintain my leverage. Maintain if I'm an edge rusher, for instance, that I got to keep my guy. I got to keep outside leverage where the running back can't come around me. And then how that affects your pass rush coming down. Are there guys that can be effective within that? Yeah. But is it sort of setting again your pass rush a little bit behind the 8 ball and asking them to instill that approach, to go at it with that kind of approach? Yeah, it is as well. And I think that's the part that to your point, this is to your point on this a little bit, Brendan, of why you see the equivalent on the defensive line to what you saw with Tom Cable is there's a little bit of that same stuff coming into play a little bit. There's a little bit of that same spirit at play and how they teach these guys to rush the passer, and when I asked the player about it, I said, so other players don't do it that way. Other teams don't do it that way. And he said, yeah, other teams don't do it that way. Other teams are more worried about the pass. Coach Carroll and his defense is very worried still about the run first and foremost, where other teams are like, yeah, if we can stop the run, so what? But we're really trying to get pass rush and generate pass rush, etc. I thought it was a pretty astounding thing and I was like, geez, okay.
Yeah. And they're still bad against the run, by the way. Let's throw that in there.
I know.
Still can't stop the run.
Isn't that the irony of it, Brendan?
Yeah. So I've already kind of given up on this defense. There are some players from it that are salvageable, but I'm already trying to figure out how we can get a lot of them out of here. I already have kind of just given up on them. What I'm really interested to see in this game is the offense, because I'm down on Wilson right now a lot, but I believe that he still could be saved. And if we see him embrace the Waldron offense, embrace the short stuff for the last 7 games, then we could reasonably say, oh, okay, now he gets it. It's too late to save this season, but maybe we can roll into next season with this. Now, would that save everyone else's job? I don't know. That might mess up the ability to rebuild because then maybe you don't fire Carroll, whatever. But Wilson might be salvageable. And if he starts to get it, because this has to be embarrassing for him. We have 20 points in our last 10 and a half quarters with Wilson playing. And I know he's had a bad finger for most of those quarters, but regardless, it has to be some acknowledgement from him that, hey, this really isn't working. Maybe I need to try to go the other way. So if Wilson can embrace this new offense, then maybe at the very least we can say, okay, we don't need a new quarterback this offseason. So that's what I'm really looking for in this game and remaining games.
Likewise, I'm in the same boat. It's been part of why amongst your pills, I've taken more of the blue pill approach with Wilson long term, being that I think I agree with you in that he can do this. He can operate within this scheme. I don't think his height limitations and some of that is necessarily a death knell for him. It's going to make it a little harder at times, but it doesn't mean that he can't get it done. It just means that he's got to adapt to it. And it's a process of adapting. It's not easy to adapt. I've spoken to you about the story of Steve Young in running the same offense, albeit in a de-evolved version 30 years ago. And they came back to Steve Young after his career and they said, man, as a shorter guy, Steve wasn't over 6'1". As a shorter guy, how is it you're completing these throws? And it was essentially came down to two things as we learn about him in retrospect. He was throwing them blind, throwing to a spot, throwing to where his receiver needed to be. And then he had a pre-snap mastery at play that was somewhat unparalleled for that time amongst quarterbacks around the game. And he leaned on those two elements to overcome those height limitations. Russell's got to find a similar kind of grab bag approach there where he works around the limitations to make it work, but he can do it. Other guys are doing it. Kyler Murray right now is doing it with the spread concepts. He's hitting those short routes. So if those guys can get it done, he can get it done as well. It does come down to embracing it and committing to it fully and not getting back into those old habits. But like you said, they're hard-lined in because he's had so much success with those old habits. He's hit the heights with it.
I said this in a recent video. Don't misunderstand me. When I'm criticizing Wilson, I'm really criticizing Carroll because you're the one who basically got him playing this way in the first place. Like, you could have brought in an innovative offensive mind after you fired Bevel. Like that metaphor you use about sending a quarterback to grad school. Yeah. No, you sent him to get his GED with a simple-minded offensive coordinator who was going to put together something functional and something easy to run, but it wasn't going to allow him to advance as a player. Yeah. And now we're here. He's had nothing but that for 9 years. And it's going to be a little hard to get him off it. And I'm not optimistic that he's going to be able to get off it, but I do think it's possible. And there's some other stuff too. Like there was one play in that Cardinals game, and it's forgotten now because it doesn't matter. But it was the first big completion to Lockett that set us up in the red zone in the first half.
Yeah.
And it looked like Lockett might have stepped out of bounds, come back in, and then caught the ball, which would be a penalty. And I'm thinking to myself when I see that replay, okay, Wilson should get up to the line and then snap it immediately because we don't need them to be challenging it. We don't need them to be looking at that again. Like, that's a big play. We need that play. We need that play to stand. So he should get up to the line, snap it. He spends 15 seconds up there standing in the pocket, not snapping it. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, he doesn't get it. And I know it didn't matter because I don't know if he actually stepped out of bounds. I don't know if it would have been overturned, but it just made me think, like, the elite quarterbacks know that in that situation, you get up there and quick snap it.
Yeah.
And I just look at that and I go, why doesn't he get this?
And there was a lot of time still on the clock. You're at, I think, a minute and 11. I think it was a minute and 11 on the clock left because you got such a big play on that Lockett move. So you could have just hiked it, handed off, gotten 3 yards, gone up there, and then called the play. And it's like you still are at the 35-yard line, 2 timeouts, something like that. So it's, game management. That's been a problem we've seen with game management lately in the last couple of years, is just being aware of your situation, of what's going on and how you need to go. But yeah, that play to me, my big one was the 3rd and 20 play, of course. Brendan, you're on about the 46-yard line. You're not going to get the first down, but you can get into field goal range. The thing about signing Myers to a 4-year, $16 million deal 3 years ago was that you were getting finally a big leg guy, what Hauschka never was, right? You're finally getting the guy who could hit 50-yarders. And while he's not been amazing through his whole time here, he has shown somewhat of a decent ability to hit some 50-yarders from time to time. For an offense scuttling, for an offense that can't find itself. You can't find a 13-yard dig route when the defense is playing some deep zone to protect against the first down, get down to the 33-yard line and kick a 50-yarder at that point. That's usually an easy play to get in that moment because the defense is first and foremost just they're stuck on, we don't want to give it the first down. We'll give you a couple yards to get you to 4th down. And they didn't even try that. They go to a run to Travis Homer, which that to me, again, is why lay over and show your belly all the time like that, especially when you didn't on the other side of it play it so aggressively, with these deep shots down the field all the time. It's like, it's that schizophrenic approach that they take sometimes of, or bipolar, not schizophrenic, but bipolar, we're going to go aggressive. No, we're going to go soft. We're going to go aggressive. We're going to go tentative. Go pedal the middle. Ooh, we're going too fast. Pick a lane, pick a lane.
Yeah. Shoot. I just lost my train of thought. That's the first time that's ever happened in one of these shows. That's what this team is doing to us, guys. That's what this team does to us right now.
It is. We're lost in the shuffle right now, and we're spinning. I tell you guys, it does make it hard though, Brendan, with this as far as where the blame goes on this to a degree. People talking about, look, get rid of Waldron. Well, do we get rid of Waldron because we don't know if Carroll's really telling Waldron what to call? Oh, well, we got to get rid of Russell. He can't run the offense. But do we get rid of Wilson if we don't know if he's really being asked to run the offense that Waldron wants to run, or if Carroll's telling him to run it, or if he's falling back into old habits, or Waldron's just not showing a firm enough hand and having it really becomes really hard. We don't know this information, and we're trying so hard to pull this stuff to put the right, where the not the blame, but how to fix it. What's our fix here so that we can figure out how it is fixable. But I think our beginning point with this is that Wilson still can. He can still, we have both of us hope in this, that Wilson can still be a bit of an answer if this turns around through the rest of the year with him. Where he adopts the system, because he is capable.
Right. Oh, the 3rd and 20 play. I want to step back on that because you mentioned that a couple times. I want to talk about that. It kind of feels to me that they did that because they just had no faith in Wilson being able to push the ball down the field a little bit there. And there was another moment in this game where Jonathan Vilma is a terrible announcer, and I don't know why he's still working there, but he did play the game. So when he says something about football, I'm going to at least listen to him. Mm-hmm. There was like a 3rd and 10 where we ran a bubble screen that was designed to get like 3 yards, like it was 3rd and 1. And Vilma said something like, that play call tells me that Wilson can't read defenses right now. They have no faith in him being able to read a defense. They just want to run a play and get off the field.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, you're saying that this 10-year Super Bowl winning future Hall of Fame quarterback doesn't know how to read defense. Like, wow. And it was a pretty mean thing to say. And that's one thing that I do appreciate about some of these younger announcers who just retired. They say things like that Chris Collinsworth won't, that Boomer Esiason won't. They'll just say it like it is if they feel it. Like Aqib Talib's doing announcing, I think, too, which is crazy to me. But
yeah, I know, he's wild.
Yeah, but they'll say things like that. And when he said that, I was like, maybe he knows something. Maybe he knows what's up here.
Well, as always, you back stuff up with stuff from one side to the other, right, Brendan? So what do we have as the Tyler quote after this game? It was almost a lot like the Tyler quotes from this offseason, talking about, oh, well, they showed us stuff pre-snap that wasn't post-snap. They just had us confused. All these teams are doing stuff that they're not putting on tape that they're showing us for the first time. It just doesn't. We're not seeing things clearly on what we're seeing, prior to what happens post. And this is the Rams' bedrock, of course, because the Rams and the Chargers this year with Staley going to the Chargers. They're running I mentioned how Seattle's the most simplistic defensively, and what they show you pre-snap coverage tends to be about 93% of the time what you're going to see post-snap. Well, that's they're on the opposite end of the scale. That is the bread and butter of the Rams defense, is essentially, we'll show you this coverage and then we'll break out of it. So this ain't going away anytime soon. And it is one of the parts that I've pecked at a little bit with Russell Wilson in his game, quite frankly, which is more of a mastery pre-snap in not only trusting what you see, but seeing the right thing, reading it correctly, because this is the Hall of Fame transition you see for quarterbacks, be it Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Phillip Rivers, Drew Brees, Tom Brady. They all had their place where they were dominant into their late 20s, but they got into the early 30s and there was a mastery, or as you said, grad school sort of took place with them, where now you dare not blitz them. You dare not blitz them, Brendan, because if you do, or if you try to do something too odd, they are going to see it and they're going to attack the hell out of it. And he doesn't have that same proclivity that he shows of an ability to really be able to do it in that same sort of fashion, in my opinion. I think he's capable, just hasn't shown it as enough of a part of his game.
Right. To me, the most important thing that a quarterback does in the NFL is get it done on 3rd down. Converting on 3rd down keeps your offense on the field. It keeps their defense on the field. It keeps your defense off the field. And to me, games are largely decided by which team is better on 3rd down. And Wilson, outside of 1 year, has been terrible on 3rd down through 3 different offensive coordinators. So that to me is big. Like there was that stat Russell Wilson is the worst quarterback in the league in obvious passing situations. Third and medium, third and long, second and long, first and 20.
Yes.
Like worse than Justin Fields, worse than Zach Wilson, worse than
say that
the
again,
worst.
Ted. So I'm gonna repeat that to the audience again because I don't think they understand that stat. Just one more time because it's a very key stat that you just said on that.
Yeah. In obvious passing situations, Russell Wilson is the worst quarterback in the league by EPA. Worse than Justin Fields, worse than Zach Wilson, worse than Sam Darnold.
I think
that
staggering.
Isn't that indicative of something?
It wasn't a staggering stat. Again, you said 32, not 24, not 19. Again, not 32. And again, as Brendan said prior to that, on top of that stat, understanding throughout his career, he has been historically one of the worst quarterbacks on third down. There are things Russell Wilson does well, but the league, the word is out on what he doesn't do well. And they're going to force you, this league, to make you do the things you don't do well and learn it or don't learn it and end up broken. And it's up to Russell which way he wants to go with that lane of things. I've got one for you too. This is a Corbin Smith one. I'm sure you saw this as well. Third down statistics for Seahawks quarterbacks this year. Russell Wilson's 13 of 37, which is 35% for 218 yards and 10 first downs. 6 yard per attempt and 62.7 rating. Geno Smith is 15 of 22, 68% versus Russell Wilson's 35. 68 versus 35% completion percentage, 139 yards, 8 first downs. So nearly only 2 less first downs than Russell Wilson on third down. Geno Smith has with a 6.3 yard per attempt and an 85 rating. Better all the way across the board.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of outside factors that influence that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Geno's better than Wilson.
No, I'm not either.
But it does go to show you that when teams know he's going to pass, he doesn't get it done. And that's his whole career. That has nothing to do with Waldron. Waldron was, I think, coaching tight ends at the University of Massachusetts when Wilson came into the NFL, and Wilson was still bad on third down. That was before Schottenheimer got here. That was before, and he's had all these different players around him too. Golden Tate, Doug Baldwin, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Zach Miller, Jimmy Graham. And there was one year, I think, where we were top 10 in third down conversion. It was 2014, which is basically one of those years, by the way, when Wilson was the fifth wheel on offense anyway, kind of, because it was a run-heavy attack.
I was just going to say, I bet that was accomplished of those top 10. I bet he had the fewest third down possibilities come up of those top 10 quarterbacks in that statistics. You know what I mean? Like they had the fewest opportunities of a third down. So it was almost a sample size like data, even though they were top 10 statistically by percentage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So just for a couple last little notes on this Washington game coming up, because we only said like one or two things about it. And I mean, it's not like we're not going to watch. I'm going to watch. Maybe some of you guys in the comments are going to find something better to do on your Monday night. I can't totally blame you, but I'm going to watch. I want to see if the Rats jump off the sinking ship or not. I want to see if we're going to continue to give effort, because there's nothing to play for anymore. So you might see the team just kind of sit back and take it now. Like the Huskies are playing in the Apple Cup tomorrow, and they have nothing to play for at all. They don't even have a head coach to impress, because we don't have a head coach right now. I kind of expect the team to just lay down, because this rivalry doesn't mean anything to them anymore. Yeah. I could see the Seahawks doing the same thing, honestly. And if they do, I want to see it. I want to see who keeps fighting.
I do too, because there is stuff to take away from this going forward. There are players that are going to be on this team going forward that we're going to hope for and count on to do well and still be performing right. And if you've got guys that are fighting in this storm and still out there giving it all, that's an indicator of like, I can ride with that guy going forward. I'm being that guy's corner. I'm going to want that guy a part of my team. And there's not a lot of them right now as we look forward, but I'm gonna be on the lookout for that as well. And what does Coach Carroll do? Does he again just fall back into the old what I know? And I'm going to die slowly, whimpering, sighing, or do you go out swinging, Brendan? Do you go out for plunder? Do you go out for hell? Do you just do whatever you can? Throw every punch you have, throw every last hook you got. What does it matter at this point? What do you got to lose? You know, and I haven't seen that approach quite yet. I haven't seen that sense of urgency in their approach quite yet in in the way that they've gone about it, especially defensively with a lack of aggression, despite the fact that you don't really have a front four that's able to generate much, really any kind of pass rush. So that's the part that I would be encouraged by, even if it failed, Brendan. It'd at least be nice to see you failing again, just trying to take it to him rather than having it always taken to you.
Right. Other than the Wilson thing that we already spent some time talking about, the main thing I want to see is I would like to see at least 40 snaps a game for the rest of the season from Alton Robinson, Brian Monet, and Daryl Taylor, because those guys could be the future. You might have something there. Monet has generally impressed me the last 2 seasons when he's been out there. I don't know if he'll be a starter, but he can be a good rotational player, I think. And Daryl Taylor speaks for himself. He hasn't played well the last 2 games, but he's basically a rookie, whatever. I'm not going to read anything into that. And Alton Robinson, they asked Carroll in the post-game presser, like, why isn't Alton playing? And he almost sounded like he said, I don't know.
Second time he said that this year, by the way. Second time in regards to Alton that he said that. I mean, that's twice somebody said that, and both times you're like, yeah, we got to find a way. Well, just find a way. You don't have to hit up with this part. We got to find a way. It's been now twice. We need 5 times it's asked where you say, why isn't he in there? But I'm with you, right? I think Dunlap is not part of the future at this point. Sit him. I mean, sit him in favor of Alton in snaps. And if he's got a problem with that, I go, Carlos, look, I get it. You have a problem with that, but you're not giving us any production. You have 0 sacks for the season. You sacked Carson, went on a two-point conversion in week 1. That's it. That's all we got from you, man. You're not giving us even league average level of production as a pass rusher, and our defense relies on our front four rushing the passer. So if you can't accomplish that, we got to try somebody else out who might just be able to. And the kid's been pretty efficient in the snaps we've given him. He may have an issue. Frankly, though, Brendan, Daryl Taylor, if you remember on the mic'd up thing, talked about the Colts game when he's coming off after, I think, sacking or hitting Wentz, where he's saying, I'm really good on the right, but I'd be dominant on the left. He's more comfortable over on that left side than the Leo. Daryl Taylor is. He wants to play that left, which is Carlos Dunlap's spot. So it'd really be about you get Alton over on the Leo, and you'd have Daryl Taylor theoretically over onto that left defensive end at times, rushing the passer, which I'd love to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why are you giving Rasheem Green 60+ snaps in this last Cardinals game? He's not going to be here next year. Even if he was good, who cares?
What has he done this year? It's like the guy's he has so many snaps for so little production. I mean, just so many snaps throughout this year, and he just doesn't give you anything. He's not a dominant run defender. Doesn't generate consistent pass rush. Might have 2 sacks, I think, on the year with all that he's been out there. Which, what are we comparing him to Carlos in his level of effectiveness? I'm not. I mean, he's just not good. Whereas Alton and Daryl have given you great efficiency and real small sample sizings. They may not be the answer, but Brendan, we've got to determine if they're part of the group going forward. Of how deep are you going forward with this group, especially if you're going to be transitioning to a different defense, theoretically speaking, to a 3-4 type defense, which less of a prevalence of needing those down 4-3 defensive ends, more of the guys that could stand up at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a little disappointed in Alton when he has gotten out there. He hasn't done a ton this year, but that doesn't mean you give up on the dude. Give up on Rasheem, who's been here for 4 years.
Yeah.
Like Rasheem's had chance after chance after chance and hasn't done it. Like he's had like 2 good games this year. He'll have a good game every 2 months.
Yeah.
Let Alton Robinson go earn the right to not be trusted. He hasn't done that yet. And unfortunately, we can't even spend the rest of this season watching Trey Brown because of, that was one of the things that would have been exciting to watch progress over this year. So I don't know. Are we going to hope that Sidney Jones keeps playing well so we can bring him back next year so he can I don't even know. I got nothing there. Obviously Jordan Brooks, he had a bad game. I'm like a elevator with Jordan Brooks every week, man. Some days he's up here, some days he's down there. And it seems like it's always an extreme. Either I'm extremely done with him or I'm extremely high on him. You're playing the Cardinals and he's out there for 90% of the snaps when you know they're going to spread your defense out and Ryan Neal plays barely anything. It's just, I can't believe that was the game plan for a team like the Cardinals. Let's get Jordan Brooks on the field, 90% of your snaps. But I do want to see him continue to get out there for the rest of the season because we got to make a decision on him. And the more experience he can get for the better, because he'll probably move to middle next year. And other than that, I don't really have anything that I care to watch right now. It's mostly focused on those things.
I do think Jordan's going to be better once he gets to middle. It's been my long take. I got to be honest with that. I'm marrying a little bit of even what was my take on college night of drafting him, which was that get him to middle eventually, and the deficiencies in his ability and coverage especially paired up against tight ends, running up seam routes and crossers and stuff. He's not going to have to do that as much. It's going to simplify things for him a little bit. It's going to put his greatest strengths, which is his tackling ability and coming downhill. He's able to do that much more, in my opinion, at the middle, less of the worry about certain other things. So I think he'll be better there eventually when he gets the line there. And let's face it, this year playing at the will, not the middle, but at the will, he's top 10 in tackles. I think he's like number 8 right now in the NFL in tackles. So he is getting production from what you wanted him to be good at on draft night. The coverage stuff is still going to remain, Brendan, and frankly, it's not going anywhere. That stuff is always it'll be minimized when he goes to middle, but he is, I think, the middle linebacker of the future for this football team. I think you do have to look at Darrell Taylor being, whether you're in a 3-4-4-3 as a guy that you take forward with it. We got to see with Alton Robinson. Really past that though, you're probably married to Jamal past this year, but you don't really know corner wise, and all does depend on defense wise what you do. But everybody else is kind of defensively on that side of the ball opened up outside maybe Puna, because Puna you could probably, even if you put a 3-4, you could put him either at you'd probably be hard pressed to put at the one for size deficiencies. You need a 3. You need legitimately the Vince Wilfork type, right? The 360 type, 370, but you put him at a defensive end, he's quick enough as a 6-foot guy. You could put him at a 3-4 defensive end and have him out there setting edges like that. And that he might fit into a scheme like that a little bit. But past that, man, I don't think you've got a lot there on the bone to really chew from. And the corner situation, again, with Trey Brown, the problem with Trey Brown, there's a couple issues there. If you'd gone a little deeper in your cornerback room and let the kid have a year to develop in a weight training program, not being out there on the fly and having to perform from day one, does he have the same kind of injury? And the thing I go back to again on this injury with the Brendan is, again, I'm going to pound the table for this to probably a boring role on this, but can we please get grass in the goddamn stadium? Can we please get grass in the stadium? I was doing the statistical look at this, Brendan. 30% more injuries on field turf, lower leg injuries, especially around the ACL and knee. There's even more just general injuries to lower leg, something like 80% more in general, not the serious kind. There's so much data out there to point to going to grass being a safer field zone to go off of, and even you can even get some advantages. Like remember the Packer game a couple weeks ago where they talked about we don't know what cleats to wear. It's like weird. You don't really know how the turf's going to play, and they know it over there. They know what cleats to wear on that side of it. It can also give you an advantage with your field. We got some of that Kentucky grass rolling out there. You don't know what kind of with our wet waters here in the Pacific Northwest, like combo it up or something. I don't know. I've seen enough of these guys go down to these lower leg injuries like Jimmy Graham did to the one he did, and they're all very similar where they don't look like major twists and turns, like the guy's knee bent behind his back. It's like a cleat gets suddenly caught a certain way, and it doesn't look horrendous. But then they're bringing out the air cast, and they got the little deal they're bringing out to drive them off the field. And you're going, boy, is this worth it? How much could the cost really be to go to grass?
I think part of it too is that it's easier to use the stadium for other things if you have a artificial turf set up, because you can pull it out and stuff. So there's some desire to use the venue for other things as well there. But yeah, you're right. A lot of people, like I was critical of the front office for not getting any impact rookies this year, and they're like, well, it's not the team's fault that we keep getting injuries and people keep using injuries as an excuse, but maybe we need to make our own luck there and reconsider the way we're doing things on that level.
And again, it comes sometimes folks attribute stuff to happenstance and luck or whatever else that you have control over. When your weight training program is bearing out you being one of the most injured football teams year in and year out for, let's say, a half decade, that's enough data to go off and say, maybe we should change our weight training program. Maybe that's enough data to go, God, we could make a change here to fix this. Some problems you can't fix, other problems you can. And I think people too often place those things that are outside the control when in actuality they're really not. And I think that's a good point, that it is probably it's harder to maintain, and they want to put a lot of different other people out there or a lot of other events out there and get them done. But boy, it's just the price you pay for that, and the players you lose over the course of the season due to lower leg injuries sure is high, and it sure hurts. Sure does hurt, because those guys don't bounce back from those things like ligament tears as easily as they do from even sometimes ACL tears.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're almost done here today, but I want to ask you one more question before we go, because there was something that happened this week in the football world that got me thinking. Mm-hmm. So the Seahawks are 3-7. The Giants are 3-7. The Seahawks are at the bottom of their division. The Giants are at the bottom of their division. Last game the Seahawks played, they embarrassed themselves in a do or die game. Last game the Giants played, they were embarrassed in what was a do-or-die game. Giants fired somebody. Why haven't we fired anybody yet? Explain.
Because the head coach is on the hot seat. In that case, the head coach is on the hot seat, whereas I'm not as convinced that Coach Carroll's on the hot seat because he's just signed the contract extension and we have an owner that's not very hands-on and he has so much of a pedigree of winning here that is, frankly, an argument that's tough on the face of it to get around. And that when you look at a guy like Joe Judge there with the Giant, he's a guy that's had a tumultuous reign there. The training camp fights that they had happen, having guys retire because they just didn't want to be under his program. And then they brought a guy like Jason Garrett in, who was, frankly, at the time when you brought him in, like, yeah, you guys were just kind of falling in love with one of your own guys within the division, a division that's not performed all that well in recent years. Kind of seems like a silly hire. So, you talk about scapegoat, Brendan. To me, it's a scapegoat situation to buy themselves more time. It's a little bit like your envelope example you made, right? Like they're at the reorganization part, right? Where Judge probably already he's probably already past blaming the prior regime, and now he's on to reorganizing, which is meaning but he's just about to his third envelope, which I think is probably going to arrive for Mr. Judge this offseason.
Probably, yeah. But it just occurred to me that, like, why can't we fire somebody if for no other reason than to just try to wake the rest of the guys up to say, hey, we're really not performing where we needed to be this year. We're going to fire somebody so everybody else knows, hey, it could be you next. You got to wake up. You got to start performing. And I'm not even talking about coordinators. You could fire Aaron Curry. You could fire Deshaun Shedd. You could fire a defensive line coach. You could fire Solari because he's not really doing that well this year. There's got to be somebody on this staff you can find that is worthy of a pink slip, because at 3-7, there's no way every coach is doing their job. So why not just do that just as a wake-up call? That's what I'm looking for.
I think that the difference on the wake-up call with this would just be it's the Carroll control that is in place. When you have a micromanager who imparts himself everywhere all the time, and that he is in and has his hand on everything, then he takes a sense of ownership for that stuff. And that's when you have that sense of ownership, you can't fire yourself essentially. And you fall back in that line of, how can I blame Ken Norton for this? Because I told him to run the defense like that. And I told him to run the defense like this. How can I blame Waldron for this? Because I told him to stop running his short stuff and then just hammer the ball up the middle and then just keep trying to take deep shots. How can I go after the defensive lineman for not getting enough pass rush, or my Clint, whatever, I forget what his name is. How can I go after him when I've told him that I first and foremost want him to stop the run and then get on the pass rush, and where people aren't just running on us very much anymore. They're just throwing on us, and that's not his fault. Like, I think Carroll will lean in that direction of always kind of excusing it. And that the only time we saw him not take this approach, which would have been that 2018 season, was one where there was a moderate amount of his seat was not hot with a flame, but there was a little bit of a hand warmer, right, underneath his butt on that one. And so out goes Chris Richard as the scapegoat. Out goes Mr. Bevel as the scapegoat. Out goes a couple of other coaches at that time as the scapegoat, Tom Cable along with it. And that bought him that Regan organizational time for Carroll at that point in time. But I don't think he can, again, not to double back to your example, but it's kind of, this is why that story is so famous of the CEO with the envelopes. It's because it fits even here. He's done his reorganization. He did it in 2018, Brendan. You pulled that card out, you looked at it and you utilized it. You can't go back and utilize it again. You're onto your third envelope if you pull open the envelope. There is no 2.5. So that's where it just won't hit. It won't land with the fan. Number one, he's got the responsibility, too much of it. He has himself in all those pies. Number two, the fan base ain't going to buy it because they're going to look at it like, you got your hand in all these pies. How can you blame that guy for being the responsible one here? Number three, the players are know of this is too, Brendan. They're knowing what's going on in that building. They can see clear and wide a coach that's watching the game pass him by on the fly. It's got to be pretty clear to them by this point in time in the season, frankly. And I think you put all those together and it just, what would be the purpose of doing it when there's just not those returns on making that kind of move?
Okay, I can kind of buy that. It kind of scares me because it kind of made me think that Carroll feels like he doesn't need to, because he knows that he's not going to get any heat anyway. Like, I don't even need to do the scapegoat thing right now because I have so much power in this organization. I don't even have to worry about it. That's what it kind of feels like. I just feel like these other teams that have their seasons be so disappointing start cleaning house at this point on some level, even if it's on a very low level. Maybe it would just make us feel good for a couple hours to see somebody on this staff get fired, but you're right. It would just be a scapegoat situation. The fact that Carroll feels like he doesn't even need to use a scapegoat makes you concerned that he could still be here for quite some time because nobody's going to push him out. But
I
I
agree with
guess
you
that's
there.
a problem for another time.
I agree with you there, and that absolutely this could be indicative of that. That the reason why also he's not taking these steps is that unlike 2018, which I believe Allen was still alive at that time, that's no longer there. That's the difference between those two time periods now, where he is essentially the de facto, as I've called him, grand poobah of the organization, and therefore there is no one to light a flame underneath his seat. So that both of them are I think both things that could be true at the same time, where he understands the impact wouldn't be great with the fan base, really, nor with the locker room, and as well as he goes I don't feel like I have to either. I don't feel like I get I'm rolling this, I'm running this, and if it doesn't go right this year, I can say, oh, it's the first year in 10 years that I had a losing season. What? I'm sorry, hot seat, huh? What are you talking about? Hot seat? First losing year in 10 years? In that 10 years, I got you a Super Bowl twice. What do you hot seat? Huh? Huh? So I mean, there's a little bit of that could exist, and I would not be surprised in the least, Brendan. It certainly makes sense with some of the decision making that has been at play, not just organizationally, but how they've gone about coaching this year.
Yeah, okay. I can get behind that. I think a lot of that there's some truth there, and I'm not saying that Aaron Curry's the reason why we're bad this year. God, I mean that would be ridiculous. Aaron Curry is so low down on that list. It's not even funny. Okay, so I guess that's all we got. I'll do a prediction, I guess, because I don't think there's much to predict. I don't think we're gonna win. Washington's playing better lately. JD McKissick will probably have like 200 yards receiving. I don't know if you saw this. We are currently on pace to set a record for most receiving yards allowed to running backs this year. A record this century.
Yeah.
No team has allowed more passing yards through 10 games to running backs than we have. And I think Taylor Heineke's playing better. And I think it'll be a somewhat high scoring game because Washington's defense is atrocious. I do expect Wilson to play better, but I feel like it'll end in another loss that should weed out the final people that are still talking playoffs. What about you, Brandon? What you got?
I'll give you my prediction. I have a quick question for you because you brought up a question in my mind with your thoughts on that. I'm going to go with a win in this game. If they had their two pass rushers in this game, I would feel differently on it. But I do think that that's going to be enough to kind of carry us through the day. And I do think that there's still enough of a glint in the locker room of feeling like we can maybe do something that they're not going to quite roll over yet. One more loss, I'd say, yeah, they'll be in that rollover mode. But I do expect them to still be fighting to some degree. I wouldn't be least bit surprised. I'm not saying we win by a lot. It's probably like a 3-point win. It's an ugly game. We muck it up. I don't think that there's anything beautiful about this game and this win, but I do think that they do play better on the road for whatever reason lately at times. And we just may see a little bit better team because of that in how it sort of plays out. My quick question on this was, and I'll go 17-14. I'll do my prediction for you. My question for you was, I was wondering, do you think our defensive struggles with giving up catches to running backs might have something to do with when they are in practice against the star quarterback, he doesn't throw to the running backs?
Hey, I that's very possible. I mean, some people have theorized before that the reason why our defensive line looks good in practice and then can't get to the quarterback in the game is because they're practicing against our offensive line, which is a tier below every offensive line they play. So, right. Yeah, that did occur to me. That has to factor in at some point, right? I remember some people saying that bringing in Waldron would be good when we played against the Rams because he would know a lot of the stuff that they're doing, even though he's not personally coaching the defense. He is coaching the offense that practices against the defense in practice. So I could buy that definitely being part of it.
I hadn't thought of it until you mentioned it. That's why I really hadn't thought of it. It just occurred to me like, well, maybe that is. If you think about it, I mean, you're 5 days a week, you're out there throwing the ball around. The guy never goes to the running backs, defensively, you're like, we need to cover this. We'll just stay back here.
All right, guys. So unfortunately, we got 7 games left in a season that is, for all intents and purposes, over. But we still have 7 games left. We're going to be coming to you guys every week with more content about where this team is and where they're headed. It really sucks that this is the season where they switched to 17 games because it'd be a lot nicer to say there are only 6 games left. That would feel very different to me for some reason, but no, we got 7 games left. But thank you, Brandon, for coming out today, my man. Appreciate it.
Me, brother.
Yeah. Hopefully there are brighter days ahead, but I just can't believe we're having this season. I can't believe that this is the way things are going.
They always say, what is it? The nightest is always darkest before the dawn, Brendan. Let's lean back on that one. Let's lean back on that hope.
Yeah. I'll go with that right now. That's really all I got. But we're gonna keep talking about it. We're not going anywhere. We're gonna keep giving our piece. We're gonna keep giving our thoughts, and hopefully they can work their way out of it. But yeah, 7 games left. That's all we can say to ourselves right now. So thank you everybody for coming out. Happy Thanksgiving. I know a lot of people were not here because it's Thanksgiving. If you're watching this on recording, I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Happy Thanksgiving.